In the previous segment of this series, we were examining the Hebrew text of the Old Testament, paying attention to particular verses which describe the earth as a circle. Playing the devil's advocate, we assumed, along with the biblical apologist, that the Hebrew writers chose the closest word in their vocabulary to describe a spherical earth, the Hebrew word hug. In all English translations of the Bible, however, and even in the 2nd century Greek Septuagint, hug is translated circle, not sphere. Could there have been a better word in the Hebrew vocabulary which the writers could have chosen had the biblical authors really been inspired to have been writing about a spherical earth? Asking such a question, we'd quickly find out that indeed another word did exist in the Hebrew vocabulary that would have left little doubt that the ancient Hebrews had a proper understanding of the earth's shape if we'd found this word in the biblical text instead of hug. The modern Hebrew word for ball, kadur, is derived from the biblical Hebrew word dur. Isaiah 22:18 reads in part, "And throw you like a ball into a wide land." The absence of expressions such as dur eretz, or ball of the earth, is evidence that indeed the ancient Hebrews did not conceive of the earth as a spherical ball-shaped object. This reflects the discussion earlier in the introduction regarding terminology. As mentioned there, some apologists object to the skeptical observation of the biblical use of circle to describe the earth by stating the Hebrew authors merely didn't have the proper terminology in their language to accurately write about the earth as a spherical object. Yet there is a difference between having precise terminology and the ability to describe something. There is a difference between terminology and description. One can certainly describe something they are aware of without using certain types of terminology. Terminology is simply the vocabulary of technical terms used in a particular field, subject, science, or art. Say, for instance, that you were trying to describe how a light bulb works. You might not have the terminology of an electrician, but you can certainly describe how a light bulb functions quite accurately using other words from your vocabulary. The fact that you can accurately describe how a light bulb works, even lacking the technical terminology, will attest to the fact that you have a certain degree of knowledge about electricity. In the same way, ancient Hebrew had a word more closely associated with naming spherical objects, dur, which could have been used to describe the proper shape of the earth if, indeed, the biblical authors had been authoring their texts with just such knowledge in mind. Looking at Hebrew vocabulary, we learn there really was a much better alternative for the biblical text, which would match the apologists' assertions that passages like those in Isaiah are referring to a sphere-shaped earth. Instead of circle, the authors could have used ball, and this would have been a remarkable assertion made by those of the biblical era. Now, I'm not going to say I'm smarter than the authors of the biblical text, and I'm reasonably certain no apologist would grant that I'm smarter than their God. But if I can observe that a more accurate word, like ball, could have been used in place of circle in the biblical texts to more accurately reflect the correct shape of the earth as a globe and not a circular dinner plate, then what does that tell you about the Hebrew cosmology described in the Bible? It tells you that the authors were either inspired by a deity more dimly witted than myself, or that no such inspiration was provided for these passages, and that they reflect the typical ancient pre-scientific view of a flat, disc-shaped earth. Now, some apologists might argue that dur from Isaiah 22:18 is used elsewhere in Scripture to mean something more akin to encircle or pile, and miss the modern Hebrew connection. If dur from Isaiah 22:18 in no sense meant a spherical object to the ancient Hebrews, how was it possible for it to have attained the modern Hebrew meaning of ball? Obviously, there is a connection, and that connection makes it clear that dur in biblical Hebrew refers to something spherically shaped specifically, and more generally to something circular. Moreover, if dur had been combined in a phrase like ball of the earth in these biblical passages, modern readers would have no doubt that the ancient biblical writers had in mind an earth of spherical shape. However, the plain reference to the earth in most of these passages as merely a circle inscribed upon primordial waters, like a drafting compass drawing a circle on a piece of paper, leaves no doubt in the reader's mind that the ancient writers believed in and were referring to the earth as a flat, disc-shaped object. But even if there weren't a word present in ancient Hebrew which the biblical authors could choose to more appropriately describe the proper shape of the earth, they could have invented one. All languages are living, changing, as the need arises. At one time, no one knew that when certain stars exploded, they would begin to pulse with high radiation. There was no word in any of the world's languages to name or describe such a thing. Thus the word pulsar was born. In this same way, the ancient Hebrews, had they knowledge of the true shape of the earth, could have, and likely would have with divine inspiration, invented a new word to describe the sphere of the earth. Consider also other biblical passages that describe what God did to form the earth. In Isaiah 42:5, it says, "Thus saith God the Lord, He that created the heavens, and stretched them out, He that spread forth the earth, and that which cometh out of it." Isaiah 44:24, "Thus saith the Lord thy Redeemer, and He that formeth thee from the womb. I am the Lord that maketh all things, that stretcheth forth the heavens alone, that spreadeth abroad the earth by myself." And Psalm 136:6, "To him that stretcheth out the earth above the waters." How can a spherical earth be thought of as having been spread forth, spread abroad, or stretched out? Such phrases work only for a flat earth. The mention of the earth being stretched above the waters recalls the Genesis creation story, as well as echoes those myths from Israel's neighbors. In no sense were the biblical authors breaking new ground. When considering all these biblical verses dealing with the earth's shape, it is important to keep them within their historical and cultural contexts, as well as considering the author's word choices. As I've already shown, if the authors of Isaiah, Job, or Proverbs had wanted to describe the earth as a sphere, there was a word ready in their vocabulary to use, or alternatively they could have invented a new word to use with this novel idea. The fact is they did not use this word, but opted for another, one that denotes the concept of circularity, not a sphere, to describe the earth. It is not at all difficult to imagine what the authors of these biblical texts are describing if one rejects their current understanding of the universe and meets the Hebrew writers in the cultural and historical context in which they lived. Apologists arguing for a spherical depiction of the earth in the biblical texts are, in fact, projecting back onto these writers the awareness they have as moderns, educated in the science of our era. One simply cannot approach Scripture with this bias. Bruce Molina, member of the Context Group, a working collection of international scholars committed to the use of the social sciences in biblical interpretation, has commented regarding this early Hebrew cosmology reflected in the biblical text. Quote, "In the model required to imagine the scenes in the ancient Israelite creation story, the earth was flat and stable, rooted in place by means of solid pillars, surrounded by water and containing some underworld within. This flat earth was covered by the vault of the sky that was stretched out, something like a half-circular tent. The vault of the sky separates the waters above from the waters below, and the stars are affixed to this vault, while sun and moon make their way across it." Next, we'll go to the ends of the earth to discover more evidence that the biblical authors did not conceive of or were inspired to believe that the earth was a spherical object.